My ex-boyfriend was an insecure guy. He broke up with me because I'd invite my 4 guy friends over to watch Netflix at my place, and we'd all lie down together in my bed. He was too jealous, and he didn't like it. One Friday at 11 at night, with my living room smelling like cold pizza and men's deodorant, I realized I didn't have a boyfriend anymore, but I did have 4 men sprawled out like they owned my apartment. My phone was vibrating with notifications and giggles, as if the whole world was waiting to see me fall or see me beg. The bedroom door was half closed, and from inside you could hear Netflix like a constant heartbeat, a mockery. I was standing there with a trash bag in my hand, looking at a bunch of someone else's socks on my floor, and that's when I understood this wasn't a romantic drama. It was a slow-motion assault, and even so I had a reason for everything. Andres, my ex-boyfriend, was always one of those who believe life is a list of strict rules stuck on the fridge. He was detail-oriented, tidy, the kind who fluffs the cushions after sitting down and turns off lights they're not using. I, on the other hand, have a freer way of existing, not messy-free. That was the first thing that attracted him to me, that I didn't live asking for permission. Or at least that's what he told me at the beginning, when he still wanted to impress me and acted all modern. We met because a friend took me to a super boring gathering, and he was the only one who seemed human there. He looked at me as if I were the world's respite and offered me a glass of something lukewarm, but with a smile that was too proper. I talked to him about everything and nothing, like always, and he got hooked on that energy of mine that doesn't know how to stay quiet. 2 months later, he was already staying at my place almost every weekend. 6 months and he was already giving his opinion on where the dish rack should go, as if it were his natural right. I loved him. Of course I loved him. I liked that he was stable, that he had a car, that he didn't live with the emotional chaos typical of men my age. I liked that when I overflowed he was the dam, the adult. But that same stability came with something I hate, the need for control disguised as concern. Andres wouldn't tell you, don't do that. Andres would tell you, I'm worried that might hurt you. As if I were a little girl with no judgment. And that's where my friends come in, my 4 best guy friends that I've known for years, long before Andres. They're my group, my routine, my chosen family. With them I don't have to pretend to be delicate or explain why I laugh loudly or why I don't want to talk about serious things. With them I can just crash and watch a series and exist without anyone evaluating me. And yes, our sleepover nights were sacred. Netflix, snacks, gossip, and all of us sprawled on my bed because it's big and because, honestly, it's comfortable. Andres made that weird face from the beginning, the one that's not anger, but it's judgment. He'd ask me how it was possible that I was so comfortable lying in my bed with 4 men, as if the bed had magic powers to turn friends into lovers. I explained to him 1,000 times that it was platonic, that it wasn't weird, that he was the one with the dirty mind, but he insisted on boundaries, on respect, on it's not normal. That word gives me an allergy. Normal is the favorite word of insecure people. The dynamic started to rot slowly, like food in the fridge that nobody wants to admit smells bad already. He started coming to my house and looking around as if searching for evidence, as if I were hiding something. And I started to feel watched in my own space. The sleepovers were my refuge, and he turned them into an interrogation. He'd tell me he felt displaced, that I prioritized my friends over him, that he was tired of being the bad guy for asking for minimal things. And I'd think, the minimal thing would be for you not to try to cut my life down to your size. The night it all exploded, I was happy. We had planned a marathon and my friends had already arrived with bags of chips and sodas and that weekend energy that makes you feel like you're still 20. We threw ourselves on the bed because, I repeat, it's my bed and I decide who lies there. We were watching some silly series laughing and I wasn't even thinking about Andres. That's what burns guys like him the most, that the universe doesn't revolve around their discomfort. Andres showed up by surprise with food, like in those scenes with the thoughtful boyfriend who thinks romance is measured in home deliveries. I heard the door and thought it was one of the neighbors, but suddenly I saw him in the bedroom doorway with the bags in his hand and that frozen look. It was a very long second. For men, me in the middle, sheets, laughter cut short. He didn't yell, he didn't make a scene, he didn't create the drama I was honestly expecting to have something against him. He just breathed weirdly, as if he were being stabbed with air, and said this couldn't go on anymore. I tried to talk, but he wasn't in the mood for explanations. He told me he couldn't be with someone who made him feel like that I didn't respect the relationship, that I treated him like he was crazy for having boundaries. And the worst part was his tone, that condescending calm of someone who's already convinced he's the hero walking away. He grabbed his stuff from my closet, gave me back a key I hadn't even asked for, and left without crying, without trembling, without begging. He left as if I were a decision already made. When the door closed, my friends started making awkward jokes, as if it were a funny scene. Wow, so intense, so dramatic, so insecure. And I nodded. Of course, I wasn't going to stand there looking abandoned. I fixed my hair, let out a laugh, and said it was for the best that he finally took off his mask, because that's what I needed to believe, that Andres was the problem, not my life, not my decisions. That same morning, with my pride burning and a heavy heart, but refusing to admit it, I decided I wasn't going to let him leave as if he had taught me a lesson. If Andres wanted to go play the wounded man, perfect, I was going to show that my life was better without his rules. And since he always said my sleepovers were a lack of respect, I did the logical thing. I organized a full week of Netflix marathons with my friends, a kind of festival of freedom in my apartment to reaffirm that I didn't need anyone to limit me. I told myself it was for conviction, for independence, for dignity. But there was also a part of me that wanted him to find out, to see pictures, to squirm, to regret it, because Andres was one of those who believe their absence is a punishment, and I wanted him to understand that his absence was a relief. So the next day I was already planning snacks, schedules, series, and a bunch of posts that looked casual but screamed, "Look how great this is." My friends were happy, obviously, because for them my house was always like a free meeting point with a big bed, air conditioning, and an owner who doesn't know how to say no. And I, in my mind, was the queen of a free kingdom, a queen who had just lost her king and was determined not to look defeated. What I didn't want to admit is that Andres, as controlling as he was the only one who put on an invisible break. He wouldn't say anything to my friends, but his presence made them behave. There was an unspoken line, something that was respected because there was an official man on the scene. And when he left, that line disappeared. But at that moment, I didn't see it as a warning, I saw it as an opportunity. Because I've always believed that if someone demands you change, it's because they're afraid you'll shine without them. I swore Andres would come back crawling when he got over his moralistic tantrum. I swore he would write, that he'd ask to talk, that he'd say he was wrong, and that's why, even though it hurt, I acted as if it were a triumph, because in my head I hadn't been abandoned, I had been liberated, and he had left because he was weak. Comments from the main story. Anonymous user 1 says, "You say your bed is sacred and platonic, but you were literally under the covers with 4 guys, and you get indignant because your boyfriend doesn't celebrate it. On top of that, the guy shows up with food, and you turn him into the villain for not applauding you. It's not insecurity, it's common sense. Nobody wants to be the official clown while you play the single girl in his face." OP's reply. "Oh, it's so easy to talk when you have no social life and think a bed is a sexual altar. If Andres came with food, it was to look good and manipulate me with his perfect boyfriend role, not because he's a saint. My friends are family, and if you guys get off on imagining things, that's a mental problem, not mine. I'm not going to live in an emotional cage because a man can't handle the idea of me having bonds before him." Anonymous user I says, "The most ridiculous thing is you act all free, but everything you did afterward was to make him jealous. A week-long marathon, photos, passive-aggressive phrases. That's not freedom, that's a tantrum. He broke up with you because you don't respect basic boundaries, and you respond by demonstrating exactly why he broke up with you." OP's reply. "I don't need to make anyone jealous. I need to make it clear that I'm not going to shrink myself to accommodate someone else's insecurities. If I post something, it's because it's my network, my life, and my right, not because I'm begging for attention. And sorry if it's hard for you guys to process that a woman can be fine without a boyfriend attached to her ankle. Andres left because he didn't know how to handle a relationship with a woman with character, and that doesn't make him a victim, it makes him weak." Update 1. It's been 3 days since the last update. At first, the 3 days felt like a vacation. No Andres coming into my house with a supervisor's face, no comments about the volume, no habit of tidying my space as if he were doing me a favor. I kept telling myself that I could finally breathe, that this was normal before he started with his obsession with boundaries. And since my friends were there, I clung to that feeling of company to not think about the silence a boyfriend leaves when he really leaves. The problem is my friends didn't come to keep me company, they came to move in. The first day, okay, it makes sense. I invited them myself. The second day, it was already weird that they were still there since the morning, as if my apartment were a 24/7 coffee shop. The third, they didn't even ask if they could come, they just showed up hungry, with half-empty bags and that excessive confidence of someone who thinks someone else's space is an extension of their comfort. I started noticing little things that if Andres had pointed them out, I would have said he was exaggerating. Piled up dishes, crumbs in the bed, cans on my nightstand. My bathroom smelled like a mix of cheap men's perfumes and dampness. The dirty laundry multiplied as if it had a life of its own. I'd say something simple, like, please don't leave glasses everywhere. And they'd laugh as if I were doing stand-up. I tried to handle it with humor because I wasn't going to go into mom mode either. But my humor wasn't enough when I started to see that my food was running out. I bought snacks for the marathon, yes, but it's one thing to share and another for 4 men to eat as if they're training for an apocalypse. I'd open the fridge and see my things were missing, my yogurts, my fruits, even the lunch I had prepared for the next day. And when I asked, they'd answer with "oh," I thought it was for everyone, as if my salary were communal. The apartment, which I've always felt was my place, started to feel occupied, not by people, but by energy. They'd put on the series they wanted, turn up the volume, talk over the episodes, leave the remote lost somewhere. And if I said I wanted to watch something different, they'd tell me not to be so intense, to relax, that now that the sourpuss is gone, we can enjoy ourselves. That nickname bothered me more than I wanted to admit, because even though Andres drove me crazy, he was my partner and no one has the right to make fun of him like that as if I were the head of an anti-Andres club. The first time I tried to set rules, they laughed in my face. I told them it's fine to come over, but please cooperate, each one wash something, don't mess up the bathroom, don't leave the bed a disaster. They looked at me as if I'd had a personality change, and Javi, who's always been the one with the big mouth, said I was becoming like Andres, and they all laughed as if that were the joke of the year. That's when I felt a weird anger, because I didn't want to be like Andres, but I also didn't want to be taken for a fool. I started to feel they were taking advantage, but an idea stopped me. If I kicked them out or demanded too much, it would look like Andres was right. And I wasn't willing to give that satisfaction to anyone, not him, not the imaginary comments from people. So I put up with more than I should have, as if enduring were a test of freedom. And then the thing with Javi happened. At first it was just stray comments like inside jokes, that I looked cute in those pajamas, that my shorts were tight, that I looked more single since Andres left. I ignored it because Javi has always had that clownish attitude and because I didn't want to start drama. But on the third day, when I was bent over looking for something in a drawer, he said something about my body in a tone that wasn't a joke. It was one of those comments that makes you feel watched, evaluated, as if your space wasn't safe anymore. The worst part is I realized he didn't dare do it before. Before, with Andres around, Javi was more respectful, more restrained, as if he knew there were consequences. Now, without that figure there, he felt entitled to test how far he could go. And I, instead of stopping him cold, just froze between pride and discomfort, because if I stopped him harshly, I'd look like the intense one. If I let it go, I'd look like someone who lets things slide. I hated being in that corner, so I did what I know how to do, turn it into a narrative. I convinced myself it wasn't serious, that it was just proof that Andres was the one setting boundaries, and I could handle it my way. And, honestly, I also thought it would add more spice to my posts, because I was obsessed with the idea of Andres seeing my life without him as an endless party. I posted a picture with them, all on my bed, laughing as if we were in a commercial for perfect friendship. I chose the angle that favored me, of course, because I'm not stupid either. And I added the phrase that came to me with the anger in my throat, Better badly accompanied than with an insecure guy. It was direct, it was poison, and it was exactly what I needed to feel I wasn't the abandoned one, but the one who chose. The reactions came quickly. Hearts, comments, giggles, people applauding me as if I'd escaped from a prison. That gave me fuel, made me feel validated, but it also left me with a weird feeling when I saw that some of Andres' friends had seen the story. That's when I knew it would get to him, that he would see it, and for a second my chest tightened. Not out of guilt, but out of rage that he might think I was doing this for him. That night, when they finally left and I could close the door, my house was a mess. I sat on the bed and saw the wrinkled sheets, the crumbs, the strange smell. An uncomfortable thought hit me. This didn't happen with Andres. With Andres, at least there was order, and I got angry with myself for thinking it, because I didn't want to miss him. I didn't want to give him space even in my mind. But the real problem came the next day when Javi messaged me privately. It wasn't a "hey, thanks for inviting me" message. It was a message with a confidence I hadn't given him, hinting at things as if my boundaries were a joke. And that's when I understood that my attempt at freedom had opened a door I hadn't meant to open. I could handle Andres, I could fight with a jealous boyfriend, but I didn't know if I could handle 4 friends who were suddenly acting like I owed them something for letting them in. And while I was dealing with that silent disgust, my phone remained quiet on Andres' end. Not a message, not a call, not a reaction, nothing, as if my post didn't matter to him, as if I didn't exist. That infuriated me more than any comment from Javi, because I wasn't prepared for Andres to really leave without looking back. That same night, my friends showed up again, laughing, asking for food, as if I were a service. And I, with Javi's message still on my screen, realized the marathon week was just beginning and I was already losing control of my own house. Comments from Update 1. Anonymous User 1 says, "What irony. You get rid of the insecure guy and in 3 days your house is invaded, you're out of food, it's dirty, and on top of that Javi's talking about your body because Andres isn't there to make him feel ashamed. You just admitted yourself that this didn't happen with Andres. So, you were using him as a gatekeeper and now you're acting surprised." OP's reply. It's not that I was using him for anything, it's that some men only show respect when another man is watching. And that's not my fault. Besides, just because my house is messy doesn't mean I'm wrong, it means they got too relaxed and that's it. And if Javi crossed a line, he'll be put in his place, period. I'm not going to romanticize Andres just because you guys want me to look like the bad guy to feel superior. Anonymous User 2 says, "You posted better badly accompanied than with an insecure guy, and you're literally badly accompanied. They eat your food, make fun of you, dirty everything, and one is already hitting on you. I mean, you humiliated yourself just to make your ex jealous. If this were a series, you'd be the cautionary tale episode." OP's reply. I humiliated myself 0. My post was to set a symbolic boundary so Andres understands he's not going to tame me with his drama. You guys interpret everything as humiliation because you live believing a woman needs permission to hang out with whoever she wants. And if my friends cross a line, they'll be adjusted. But that doesn't make Andres a martyr or me a fool. I'm just going through a moment and that's it. It's not a final judgment on my life. Update 2. It's been a week since the last update. I thought Andres' silence was a tactic, one of those dignified poses that last 2 days before their attachment issues burst through the seams. I imagined he was watching me from some fake account, that he saw my stories and was fuming inside, that he was biting his tongue not to message me. Because that's how guys who play at being proper work. They act tough until they realize they miss you. That's why I kept posting, not out of need, but for strategy. I needed the world to see I was fine and, by the way, for him to understand what he lost. The first sign that something wasn't going as I wanted was simple and humiliating. One day I opened Instagram and saw his stories weren't showing up for me anymore. I thought I had no signal, I thought it was a bug. I thought anything but the obvious. I went to his profile and got that cold screen. No message button, no following, nothing. Then I checked WhatsApp and his picture was gone. I checked Facebook and he was gone. I checked TikTok and he was gone too. Andres didn't ignore me. Andres deleted me. He blocked me from everything without a single word, as if I were a disease to be cut out at the root. That lit a strange rage in me, because it's one thing for a guy to break up with you and another for him to take away your ability to exist in his life. Blocking isn't a boundary, blocking is a punishment. And I wasn't going to accept a punishment from someone who, according to him, was doing the right thing. I stared at the screen as if by concentrating hard enough he would reappear. And while I was processing that stab in the back, I heard laughter from my room because my friends were already there again as if nothing had happened. That day I decided that was it, that a comfort marathon was one thing and my house becoming a permanent camp for grown men with nothing to do was another. I walked into the room with my firmest tone, the tone Andres normally used when he wanted to be taken seriously, and said I needed the apartment to myself, that I wanted privacy, that it was enough, that they should go home. It wasn't even rude, it was logical. I have things to do, I have a life, I'm not a hostel. They didn't even move, literally, they just looked at me over their shoulders, the way you look at someone who interrupts a game, and one of them said they were in the middle of a season and they were almost done with that episode. Javi, with that smirk of someone who thinks everything's a joke, said I should relax, not be so intense, that I've been weird since Andres left. And that's when the full impact hit me. To them, I wasn't the owner of the house, I was the venue. I was the one who provides the place, the Wi-Fi, the bed, the food, and the permission. I was the plan. I tried to explain it again, more clearly, more directly. I told them it wasn't negotiable, that they had to leave, that they were exhausting me. And then they laughed, but not like friends anymore. They laughed like when someone feels they have power, like when they know they have you cornered because you don't want to look bad. One said that if they bothered me so much I should leave for a bit. Another reminded me with a kind of venomous tone that I myself invited them to my bed and now I couldn't start acting like a prude. It was one of those phrases that don't sound so bad until you understand what's inside them. My body felt weird, like when your gut warns you about something before your head accepts it. I looked around and saw my room full of other people's things, other people's bodies, other people's confidence. I tried to stay in control because I don't like to look small, but inside I was already thinking about how to make them leave without this turning into a physical fight. Because even though I think I'm strong, I also know when a situation stops being a joke. And Javi decided to cross the line. It wasn't like in the movies where the aggressor clearly looks like a villain. It was fast, confusing, with that excuse of a joke they use to test how far they can go. He got up, got too close, grabbed my waist as if it were normal, and said something about how I was always flirty with them. That I shouldn't pretend. I pushed his hand away and told him no, to calm down, what's wrong with him? And then I saw in his face that mix of wounded pride and boldness, as if my no was a challenge. He tried to kiss me by force, just like that, as if I owed him something. I pushed him and told him he was crazy to respect me. And he, instead of backing down, got worse, as if my rejection had given him permission to justify himself. He said if I invited them to sleep in my bed, then I shouldn't play the saint, that I always gave them an opening, that you don't do that with just friends. He said it with a disgusting confidence, as if he were quoting a universal law. And the others didn't stop him. That's what chilled me the most. They didn't stop him. They watched, they laughed uncomfortably, but nobody stopped him. That's when I got really scared, even if it's hard for me to say it. I got scared because I understood I had been playing with fire out of pure stubbornness, pure pride, for wanting to prove something. I got scared because my house felt like it was theirs and not mine. I got scared because Andres wasn't there, and for the first time I thought of him not as a controller, but as a presence that commanded respect without needing to yell. And I hated thinking that because it meant I had underestimated the world. So I did the only thing I could think of to regain power quickly. I threatened them with Andres. I told them to calm down, that Andres was coming back soon, that he wouldn't allow this, that if they touched me or disrespected me, they'd have problems. I said it with my chest out, with that theatricality I know how to use when I need someone to believe me. I clung to the idea that Andres's name still carried weight, that he was still a real man in their minds. But they looked at each other and laughed, as if I had told a terrible joke. One said that Andres blocked me, that he wasn't my boyfriend anymore, that I should stop making things up. Javi said if Andres were coming back, he would have been back already, that I was just saying it to scare them because I'm alone. And then I felt a shame that burned my face. Because the worst part is they were right. I was lying and they knew it. Andres' name wasn't a shield anymore, it was a ghost. The struggle got uglier because I tried to leave the room and they blocked my way without thinking how serious that looked. I started yelling at them to get out. That's it, don't touch me, this isn't a game. Javi grabbed me again. I hit him on the chest, tried to push him away, and in that clumsy, desperate movement, one of them tripped on the table where the TV remote was. Another lunged to grab something, and everything became a chaos of hands, feet, wires. And that's when I heard the crash. It wasn't just any crash, it was that sound of expensive glass dying. The 65-inch screen, the blessed huge screen that Andres had paid for in installments as a symbol of a stable couple, came crashing down at a horrible angle. First was the crackle, then the image split into lines of color, and then it went black. I stared as if one of my organs had shut down because that TV wasn't mine. It wasn't in my name, and I knew perfectly well what that meant. The four of them stood still for a second, like kids who broke something at someone else's house. Nobody said, "I'm sorry," right away. Nobody offered to fix it. The first thing I heard was a "what bad luck," as if the universe had knocked it over on its own. I felt a coldness in my stomach because in my head there was already the image of Andres receiving the notification from the bank, the receipt, the contract, his name tied to this disaster. I thought about the landlord, about the complaints, about everything. And although I don't admit guilt, I do understand consequences. At that moment, I tried to change my tone because I know when to play another card. I told them this wasn't going to be left like this, that someone had to be responsible, that this costs a lot of money, that they shouldn't play dumb. And they started with the typical coward strategy. Minimize, laugh, say it was an accident, that I was also in the scuffle, that I provoked it. Javi even took an offended stance, as if I were the one who had humiliated him by rejecting him. He said I made a scene and now I'm playing the victim. I stood there trembling with rage, with fear, with frustration, because at this point it wasn't a marathon or a breakup, it was a collapse. And the worst part is that Andres, the one I wanted to make jealous, didn't even exist on my social media anymore to see my disaster. I wasn't winning anything. I was losing real things that cost money, stability, a roof over my head, and that broken TV on the floor seemed like a sentence, as if the universe were telling me the game was over. I tried to call someone, but my pride stopped me. I tried to message Andres from another number, but I stopped because I was furious that he would think I was looking for him out of need. And while I was making those internal calculations, the four of them stood there looking at the screen as if it were a dead animal. I looked at them and understood that none of them were going to take responsibility voluntarily. And that night ended with the television on the floor, my room smelling of tension, and me locked in the bathroom trying to breathe, knowing this wasn't going to be fixed with an Instagram story. Because now the problem wasn't just that my friends wouldn't leave. The problem was they had broken something that had a name and a last name, and that last name wasn't mine. Comments from Update 2. Anonymous User 1 says, "They told you so, and here you are. The guys moved in on you. They ignored you when you asked them to leave because they were watching a series, and one even tried to kiss you by force with the excuse that sleeping in your bed was giving them an opening. That's not a platonic friendship. That's allowing an invasion until it blew up in your face. And now they broke the 65-inch television that was in Andres' name. You just shot yourself in the foot and in the wallet." OP's reply: "You guys are so dramatic. You seem happy that something bad is happening to me. If Javi crossed a line, he crossed a line. But I handled him, and I'm not going to sit here crying like you want me to. And the TV thing was an accident resulting from the chaos. Not because I allowed anything. Besides, Andres is no saint either. He left without talking, blocking me as if I were trash. So don't come here saying everything he did was to protect. I have the right to live my life without a man being my security guard." Anonymous User I says, "Your threat was to say Andres was coming back and they laughed because they know he blocked you. That's the saddest part. You're left without a boyfriend and without authority in your own house. And the broken TV is karma with a bill. You wanted to make him jealous, and you ended up with a debt that's not even yours. They used you for the place, the food, and the bed. Congratulations on your freedom. OP's reply. It's not sadness, it's rage, because I don't depend on Andres to have authority. It depends on people having manners, something you guys clearly don't have either. And if they laughed, it's because they're immature and don't know what respect is. I'll solve the TV thing because I solve things, not like Andres who blocks and disappears like a child. If anyone thinks this is karma, they should check themselves, because life isn't a morality tale. Update 3. It's been 2 hours since the last update. Everything happened quickly after the TV broke, as if the chaos had been waiting for that crash to fully unleash itself. I stayed in shock for a while, looking at the dead screen, as if by staring at it angrily I could turn it back on. I felt a tightness in my chest, a dry throat, and that absurd need for someone to tell me everything was going to be okay. But instead of that, the only thing I saw was 4 men calculating how to escape without taking responsibility. At first, they tried to act like nothing happened, as if they could still stay there and continue the series on another device. One said they should go buy something to eat, as if that were the main problem. Javi started looking for his jacket with suspicious speed, avoiding my gaze. I told them nobody was leaving until they told me what they were going to do, that this costs money, that I'm not their ATM. And that's when I saw that reaction that shatters your illusions, the annoyance of someone who feels trapped by responsibility. One said it wasn't that big a deal, that it could probably be fixed, that I was exaggerating. Another said the TV was already old, as if a 65-inch TV paid in installments gets old out of convenience. Javi, the bravest one 5 minutes ago, was now playing the victim, as if the broken TV was my fault because of my attitude. I listened to everything and felt my face burn with shame, but not because of what happened, but because of the brutal clarity. They weren't my brothers, they were my users, and I was the one giving them the service. When I told them I was going to call the police if they left without paying, they got tense, not because they cared about my fear, but because they cared about their own problem. That's when I saw them move fast. They started gathering their things as if there were a fire alarm. One went into the bathroom for his toothbrush as if he lived there. Another grabbed a bag of snacks, as if it were his right to compensation. Javi didn't even say goodbye. He just muttered that I should calm down, not make a drama, and in a matter of minutes they were gone. They literally fled. I was left alone with the smell of sweat, with the bed a mess, with the TV on the floor like an expensive corpse. I closed the door and felt a silence that hit my ears. That silence wasn't peace, it was abandonment. I looked at my phone wanting to write in the group chat, to demand things from them, to make them feel guilty. But when I opened WhatsApp, they were already gone. They had blocked me from the groups, from the chats, from everything, as if I were the one who had hurt them. That part was so absurd it made me laugh, an ugly laugh of desperation. For men who moved into my house, ate my food, disrespected me, broke someone else's TV, and they still had the nerve to block me so they wouldn't have to face me. I stared at the screen as if it were a badly told joke. I started walking around the apartment like a caged animal. I looked at the walls, the floor, the broken television, and I remembered Andres paying for it. I remembered him talking about installments, about responsibilities, about the future, and me making faces at him because it sounded boring. I remembered how he always checked that the door was properly locked, that no one stayed too long, that my house didn't turn into a dump. And for the first time, with no one around to judge me, I felt an unbearable thing. It wasn't that Andres was toxic for setting boundaries, it was that I hated feeling controlled even when the control protected me. I wanted to call Andres, but I couldn't. I wanted to write to him, but I was blocked. I wanted to act dignified, but my dignity wouldn't pay for a television. Then I thought about the landlord, because in the end he's the one who manages everything. And that's when the cruelest reality hit me. The landlord was Andres's friend, meaning everything was connected to him, as if my life had been held up by Andres's structure, and I had only dedicated myself to criticizing it. I didn't have much time to play tough. 2 hours later, while I was still picking up pieces of plastic and glass, I got a message from the landlord. It wasn't a hello, it wasn't a how are you. It was direct, cold, like a bank notice. He told me he had received complaints about noise, that the neighbors were fed up, that they had seen too many people coming and going, and that there was also damage to the property. He notified me that I had to move out. Just like that, no discussion, no kindness, no chance to explain. I felt the floor open up beneath me because it's one thing to fight with an ex and another to lose your home. I replied quickly, trying to sound calm, saying it was a misunderstanding, that there was a gathering, that it was over, but his response was worse, because it wasn't an insult, it was indifference. He told me the decision was made and it had already been discussed, as if I were an administrative problem. And I knew, without him saying it, that Andres had influenced it. Not necessarily out of revenge, but because that world of order works that way, they protect each other. I sat on the floor next to the broken television with the eviction notice glowing on the screen, and I felt a mix of rage and clarity. My platonic friends were nothing when there were consequences. My freedom was a joke when no one respects you. And Andres, the supposedly insecure one, the one I called toxic for asking for boundaries, was the only one who treated me with a respect I mistook for control. He didn't stay for convenience, he stayed because, in his logic, you take care of a relationship. And I laughed at that logic until I was left with nothing. I'm not going to say it was all my fault, because it's not like that either. My friends failed me, Andres failed me with his cruel blocking. The landlord failed me with his coldness, but I had to accept one thing, even if it hurts, I built my life like a stage to prove something. And when the curtain fell, nobody stayed to clean up with me. I was left alone, with a debt that isn't mine but will fall on me, with an eviction notice, and with a man who doesn't even want to read my name anymore. That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't open Instagram, I didn't post anything, I didn't write any quotes. I just stared at empty boxes in my living room, thinking about how it feels to be blocked from someone's life and understanding that what I called insecurity was actually the only barrier between my chaos and total disaster. And the disaster was already here. Comments from Update 3. Anonymous user 1 says, your platonic brothers fled when they saw the broken TV and then blocked you so they wouldn't have to pay. They left you with a 65-inch television in your ex's name and with the landlord giving you an eviction notice for noise and damages. This wasn't bad luck, it was a consequence. You preferred to humiliate Andres on social media rather than set boundaries in your own house. Now you have freedom and zero roof over your head. OP's reply. Zero roof. Not yet. Don't exaggerate, I always find solutions and you guys talk as if I invited criminals over when they were my friends for years. I mean, don't tell me I brought this on myself as if I could predict they would act like this. Besides, the landlord is Andres's friend. This smells more like a coordinated punishment than justice. If Andres were as mature as you all pretend, he wouldn't have disappeared by blocking me like a coward and then pulling strings to leave me on the street. Anonymous user 2 says, the best part is your own phrase buried you, better badly accompanied than with an insecure guy. You were left badly accompanied, harassed by Javi, without friends, without a boyfriend, without a house, and paying for the insecure guy's TV, who was the only one who commanded respect. I hope Andres never unblocks you. Not because he's a bad person, but because he finally understood that you don't change. You just dramatize until it's time to pay the bill. OP's reply. Sure, I hope so, because you guys love to see a woman destroyed to feel morally superior. Andres didn't command respect, he commanded fear, and I don't find that admirable, I find it sad. If now I have to solve the TV and the apartment situation, I'll do it because I don't break like he broke over a sleepover. And if I learned anything, it's that people show their true colors when there are problems, including you guys who only know how to kick someone when they're down.